Hello. I want to run you through how I'm looking at your Project 3s so that you have a strong grasp of exactly how I will be grading the final project. So to do so, what I've done is I've taken a student project from the blog and I've thrown it onto a Google Doc and I've highlighted some things. And I want to just kind of read through it and explain it. And I'll talk about this project, but I'll also talk about the projects in general so that hopefully you have a really strong understanding of exactly what I'm looking for the project. So let's begin. Here we go. Here we have a project that a student has decided to do on the organization PETA. And so the student starts by writing an introduction about PETA, which is pretty good. And then at the end of that introduction, the student has the thesis. And the thesis thus far reads as follows. That being said, it comes as no surprise that PETA uses certain propaganda techniques to spread their message about animal cruelty being committed and to sway public opinion in their favoring cause. Now, this sentence right here, I consider the first sentence of the thesis. And it's really cool. It makes perfect sense, although there are a couple of points I'd like to make. Number one, notice that the student is using certain propaganda techniques, and that vague language should actually be mentioning specific techniques. One of the challenges, and we'll see this in a moment, is that the student doesn't mention specific techniques in the body paragraphs, so the student hasn't yet thought specifically enough to put in the thesis what's going to ultimately be necessary. Furthermore, and this is really big, you can see that I added this, let's call this the blue sentence. And I've added this blue sentence because at this point, the thesis here is only one sentence. And this one sentence really is only a sentence that's introducing the analysis that's going to be done. But that's only half the battle. For as well as the analysis that you guys have to do, you also have to build a larger argument premised on that analysis. And so you have to say something about the PETA's use of this particular technique or these particular techniques. And that's where the paper gets complex and interesting. So in this case, the person could go a number of angles. They could say that it's unethical that PETA uses such a technique. They could say that it's absolutely necessary because other companies do the same thing and we have to fight fire with fire. In other words, the student has to draw a conclusion about the very techniques that are being used. If we take a look at the examples that I provided a couple of weeks ago, you can see that when I gave you these examples from students, the students gave me these analytical paragraphs here, or analytical paragraph, but the student then drew a larger conclusion here. And it's this larger conclusion sort of work that's lacking in the paper that we have so far. So all I've got is an introduction of analysis, and then I have these analytical paragraphs. And so let's move to these analytical paragraphs for a second. If we look at this first analytical paragraph, we can see that the student does start to do some really good analysis of what happens on the PETA website. So it starts like this. One way that PETA drives their point home about animal cruelty and suffering is through viral videos displaying such horrors. These videos, which can be found on YouTube and PETA.org, are eyewitness accounts of the atrocities that animals on farms, factories, and the like endure on a daily basis. Awesome. Very, very, very cool claim. And clearly this person is looking at how PETA uses propaganda in order to persuade the audience, but this person is not addressing a specific technique. And that takes us back to the materials that I provided here. Here are specific techniques, and I need to see that you're doing specific analysis of these techniques. So if we come back to where the student is thus far, the student can use this sort of thinking, but they need to connect it to a specific technique and the definition of that technique. Otherwise, they're still kind of addressing things that are a little vague. So thus far, the student has a really strong beginning of the thesis with this sentence, and the student's providing some good analysis here, but the analysis isn't being connected to a real specific technique. Again, if we go back to the examples that I provided here, you can see that if we look at this example, when we're looking at the analysis, this is starting by naming a technique. In this case, glittering generality. And it's then defining that technique and then applying that specific technique to what the company is doing. Such work isn't found in here yet. And so, of course, this is a draft, but these are the sorts of things that we need to consider. When I look at the bottom here, I can see that the student is saying, what I need to do to finish the project is to do another paragraph of analysis and then finish up. But that's not true, because the student really needs to specify the analysis that currently exists and bring in specific propaganda techniques, and the student needs to make sure that there's a larger argument that takes shape in the paper. And most likely that large argument is also going to bring some outside research. Now, for you folks who are doing projects on companies like McDonald's or on the military or something like that, you can easily bring in some outside research that you find. For the folks who are doing this sort of analysis on companies that you're inventing or companies that you want to see in Fahrenheit 451, for the 451 folks, I imagine that you guys are going to be using direct textual support from the novel. And so in general, look at the yellow and look at the blue. You need to make sure that you're doing both. The yellow demonstrates that you can do really close specific analysis, and the blue demonstrates that you can build strong, larger arguments. I hope that this helps. Take care.